I didn't even write it because it was all written down.
Just kidding. I was looking at the novel.
Okay, yeah, don't look at the Noppold yet.
I just saw like one thing that I saw.
Yeah.
All right, let's do our quiz then. Nice. Should apply. All right, let's go ahead and pass those on up when you're done. All right, so which of the following occurs when blood vessel diameter increases? That's vasodilation. Of course, constriction is the opposite, which is not one of the layers of a blood vessel: interna, externa, media, or elastica. Or elastia, I don't know, I just made up a word. Elastia. What type of shock occurs from blood loss? It's a hypovolemic shock there. What does the word shock mean? Is that on that? I feel like everyone always says it, but what does it actually mean? What did all those 4 types have in common? What? Yeah, and what would cause that? Because you're right, perfusion to the tissues gets too low and it damages everything. And why was it low? To what? What? Well, that would be like a loss of blood one. But you also had like the vascular shock, the other septic shock. So all of them lead to drastically low blood pressure, which causes low perfusion and no oxygen to the tissues. So that's kind of what they all have in common. It's just the cause of it, right? It's either loss of blood, or maybe it's like an immune response, allergic reaction. Why would that cause low blood pressure? Like anaphylactic shock? Maybe it is. Not really swelling. It's a good idea, though. It's sort of related to that. Yeah, but what does that have to do with your blood pressure? It drops very low, but why? So part of the immune response, remember, is like vasodilation. So if you dilate all your blood vessels, what happens to your blood pressure? Just craters. Because, you've got the same volume and all of a sudden you like triple the volume. Or guess not really triple the volume, right? You increase the amount of space that that same volume takes up, so the pressure drops. Anyways, I felt like that was something the book didn't really.
So will shock like always damage your tissue?
Yeah, I mean, if it's not treated promptly, any kind of shock will be damaging.
When I was little, I got hit by a car, and I went into shock, but like I stuttered for like 3 years.
Really? Huh.
They said
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, the shock response is a good thing for the most part, because it's, well, I guess it's not a good thing, but fixing the shock, which is what we're talking about, like your body does respond to try to fix it. But yeah, so was it from like loss of blood then you went into shock, you think? Oh, so it was just like the,
like they thought I was like dying.
oh my
There was
goodness.
like nothing wrong other than going into shock.
Which was just like unemotional because it was so like terrifying. So yeah, what does the fight or flight response do? It does vasodilation, right, in some places. But it should increase your blood pressure. I don't know. I have to look at that now. Now I'm wondering. Because you're right, like you can, if you're in a really terrifying situation, you can go into shock from it. But I don't know the mechanism for it. Yeah. All right. Something else for me to figure out. Oh, we didn't even finish the quiz. All right. What's lowest, systolic, diastolic, or mean pressure? It's diastolic. Systolic's the highest. Mean is like sort of an average of the two. More complicated formula. And which of these is not a way that substances move through capillaries? Simple diffusion, capillary pumping, bulk flow, or transcytosis? Capillary pumping. That's a term I just made up. That was on there, right? List of 3 mechanisms. Yeah, by which materials cross walls. It was last week, I know. Oh, wow. All right. So how far did we get? We talked about types of arteries. We talked about capillaries. I remember, I think we just did the types, and then we were here, right?
Yeah. Last kind
Sure. I spent all patho yesterday talking about capillaries. All right. All right, so before we talk about the veins, remember think of as, you start in like that really large artery, like the aorta, and then it branches, smaller and smaller, and then the smallest would be the capillaries, where all the nutrient and waste exchange happens. And then, obviously that blood needs to come back to the heart, right? So you have those tiny capillaries, form up into veins, and they slowly get larger and larger in diameter as they form together and go back. What's the biggest vein that goes to the heart? You dissected it? Yeah, so eventually they all combine to make a superior vena cava, which comes from above, and an inferior from below. And go into, what part of the heart do they go into? The right atrium, exactly. If you still don't know it, get those cards out. Put them in order. All right. So it's kind of interesting the different structures that the types of veins have. So first, the very small ones, they just kind of collect the blood. The muscular veins, they're able to change size. So if your blood pressure happens to be a little bit higher than normal, your veins can actually expand to kind of take some of the pressure out of the blood, basically, so it doesn't lead to constant high blood pressure. All right, and if you want an overview of all those, feel free to click through that. But we're mostly talking about blood pressure today anyways. All right, here's a little SAT question for you. Looking for 3 more votes. Nobody at your group voted?
I did.
All right. So almost everybody put A, and that was correct, which is good. This one usually gets people. So yeah, arteries carry blood away from the heart, but it's not always full of oxygen. Which artery has oxygen-poor blood in it? Yeah, pulmonary artery, you're right. Because it's heading to the lungs to get oxygen, so it's full of low oxygen blood. All right. So as I mentioned, we're spending most of this chapter just talking about blood pressure, rather than talking all about the anatomy of veins and stuff. I think blood pressure is more interesting. All right, so this is quite a graph here. And it's basically showing you the trace of blood pressure all the way through the systemic circulation. So through the arteries, capillaries, venules, veins, vena cava, all the way through. Why is it going up and down the arteries there like that? Why is it got the wave pattern? Yeah, so that's the systolic, diastolic contraction, relaxation. If you notice, did that change the pressure in the veins when the heart contracted or relaxed? Or does it look like it's just always the same over here? It's the same, right? So when you're doing systolic and diastolic, that's the pressure in like the arteries and the arterioles. Once it gets down to the capillaries, it's sort of a constant pressure. And so if you think about what is pressure, like from chemistry or physics, I guess that's physics. When you say something has a certain pressure, so it's like the amount of liquid in a certain space. So if you increase the amount of space, what happens to the pressure? It drops. What if you increase the amount of liquid in the same space? The pressure will rise, right? So you kind of think of that. By like the blood volume, you could change the amount that way, or you can change the size, which would be like vasodilation or constriction in certain places. Or you can change cardiac output. Because if you're pumping more blood, what do you think is going to happen to the pressure? It'll go up, right? So there's all different ways you can kind of change it. And for blood pressure, they've kind of come up with this unique sort of term called vascular resistance that basically accounts for everything that could change in the arteries and the veins. Nothing that changes in the heart, but everywhere else. So the resistance depends on how open the blood vessels are, constricted or dilated. Also the total length of blood vessels, because if you've got more blood vessels, well, that's going to spread the volume out more and decrease the pressure. And then blood viscosity, so how thick it is, how watery it is, basically. So as an example, what do you think, what happens if you go to like real high altitude right away? Your blood thins? What do you mean? It thickens, right? Because your body's trying to concentrate the red blood cells. What do you think that would do to the viscosity of your blood? It would increase it, right? Because there's less liquid compared to cells. All right. So which of these do you think would increase resistance? And another way to say that is increase blood pressure. All right, so have you talked to your group then, and we'll vote again. I think, yeah, it seems to be true.
It's harder to get drunk at lower altitudes.
Yeah. No, I think so. It seems to be true.
He's like, I can drink all day in Mexico and be fine.
And I think it's just the concentration. So like, our blood volume's lower at high altitude. So if you like drink a beer, alcohol dissolves, it's going to be at a higher concentration than it would be at the lower altitude. But I think there must be something else too.
Yeah.
They haven't figured out the mechanism. I looked up, there's a few papers on it.
You haven't read all the papers?
No, I read the only ones they had.
No.
I was going to do it for Journal Club when I was at the lab. So we could present a paper on anything. All right. So the answer is E. Vasoconstriction, that's more resistance. And then dehydration, what does that do to the viscosity of the blood? It would increase it, right? All right. I guess before we get into all the control of blood pressure, we talked about what happens when blood pressure is too low, right? Not enough perfusion, not enough nutrients to the tissues. Why would high blood pressure be bad? Stresses the heart. What else would it stress, do you think? Yeah, so your arteries could get damaged. Do you think you might be at a higher risk for like strokes, heart attacks? That's very true. It's also bad for your kidneys. We haven't done the kidneys yet, though. So we'll see that soon. So the body's got to have systems in place that would fix low blood pressure and systems that fix high blood pressure. Got to make sure it stays in some kind of healthy range. One of the easiest ways is to put baroreceptors, which are just neurons that can tell how much pressure is being put on the arteries, or the atria as well. So some different places. One's the carotid. Of course, you know where the carotid artery is, going up through here. I think that's the one that vampires go for. Or maybe it's a vein, I don't know. Depends on which vampire movie you're watching. If it's like spewing or, anyways. And the aorta and the atrium. So we've got 3 different locations, all of which, you need to have proper blood pressure. So you kind of check them in all the areas, and then you can send impulses back. So in this diagram, the baroreceptors are in blue, the blue lines. So you see they're coming from, which one did they put? I think they just put the atria one and the carotid sinus, the carotid artery one. So it sends information back to the brain, brainstem, the medulla oblongata. And you remember that does not affect your emotions, despite what Waterboy says. Why they couldn't get it right, I don't know. And then you can send information back to the SA node there. What do you think? What does the SA node do again? It decides what the heart rate is, right? That's where it's kind of set. So it's the main places. You could also send information back to the AV node as well. So if you had, let's say these receptors were sensing high blood pressure, what do you think it's going to tell? What's the medulla going to tell these nodes to do if it's high blood pressure? Beat faster? Beat slower, right? Because if you beat slower, you're going to decrease the blood pressure, decrease the output. What if it detects low blood pressure? It's going to, go over here, and the medulla is going to say, hey, beat faster. We're not getting enough blood. Do something. Great. All right, so let's take a look at the response to low blood pressure. This one.
Nutrients and waste between blood and body cells occurs. If the pressure is too low, not enough blood goes into the capillaries. If the pressure is too high, blood vessels can break, causing internal bleeding and possibly strokes. The aortic arch and common carotids are arteries that supply blood to critical areas of the body. The aortic arch supplies the body, and the common carotids supply the head. Within these major arteries are structures called baroreceptors that measure blood pressure and send nerve impulses up to the brain. If pressure is high, the walls stretch. If pressure falls, the walls are less stretched. Baroreceptors send information to the cardiovascular center in the medulla oblongata in the brain. When blood pressure drops, the slower rate of impulses from the baroreceptor conveys this disruption to homeostasis to the CV center. The CV center sends its own nerve impulses out to the heart and many of the blood vessels.
What do you think the blood vessels are going to do if the blood pressure is high? They're going to dilate. Exactly. How do we freeze it? Where's the one I was looking for? That's weird. right, well, we froze it, but that's okay. All right, so it's just basically what we're saying. The blood pressure is down. You're going to increase your heart rate and contract harder as well, which will increase the cardiac output. So what was the cardiac output? What were the two things you could multiply together? Stroke volume, and it's not quite blood pressure, although it's kind of related. So up there, which of these are we increasing? It's both, right? Because force of contraction increase means you're pumping more blood out each time, and heart rate increase means you're, well, pumping more blood every minute. And so then your blood pressure is like cardiac output and resistance. It's all kind of related. All right, so hypovolemic shock, that's where you lost a whole lot of blood for some reason. Could be internal bleeding, maybe it's the vampire thing, sucking your blood out. So the body's got to do something to get that blood pressure back up. One of the first things you do is an antidiuretic hormone. So from its name, what do you think it does? And how does it do that? Yeah, so actually most of its effect is on the kidneys. So if a diuretic makes you urinate more often, what do you think antidiuretic does? So less urination, which means the kidneys are taking less water out of the blood, which means higher blood volume. All right, and when we do once we get to the kidneys, we're going to test your urine and see if you've got a antidiuretic hormone going on or not. And we're going to find out if you're pregnant or not. No, just joking. That would be really funny, though. Surprise! That's not the strip I gave you. Oh, and I make them all positive, too. Modify them. So everyone just has a complete meltdown. Ross is like, what happened? What's happening to me?
I'm a medical miracle.
Be fun. All right, so what else? Do you remember what the sympathetic nervous system does? It's going to constrict the blood vessels. Not all of them, though. The peripheral ones. What else does it do? Does it do anything to your heart directly? Yeah, so it's like that fight or flight response, right? Increase heart rate, increase contraction. And that's like epinephrine, is the hormone that does those things. Be part of it. And what do you think this local vasodilators is about? Because we've got low blood pressure, so why would you be dilating anything? Well, doesn't dilate reduce pressure? So
You need to try to perfuse the blood to the tissues around the area.
not really. Do you think there's certain areas of the body that are more important to get blood to?
When you're jogging.
So that's where those local vasodilators would happen. So like the brain, the heart, the lungs would be another one. Because if one of the biggest problems, if you're not getting enough blood throughout the body, that means the lungs aren't getting quite enough to get the oxygen in the blood. So you can kind of reroute your blood flow, like take it away from the kidneys, take it away from the liver.
Those are constrict some of like the non-major ones and then dilate.
Exactly. And especially like the peripheral blood vessels, like the ones in your skin, because you've got lots of blood vessels in your fat tissue under your skin and like in the dermis, but you don't need all that blood there all the time. So you can very easily cut off, 2/3 of the blood flow there and keep it conserved for your heart and your brain and everything. It's just crazy. So what happens to people if they get like stranded in the snow for days? What parts of their body fail first?
Extremity.
Right? So you can like have your whole hand like freeze and be like, dead basically. But the body is able to keep the heart and your brain working for, quite a while. What?
I'd rather have my heart and brain than dead. That's
Yeah.
what hurt.
Yeah, that's true. But that's kind of one of the reasons for doing this. All right. So the epinephrine we talked about increases your blood pressure by increasing the heart rate and forcing contraction. So more cardiac output. ADH, kind of talked about that one. It's activated by low blood pressure. And it reduces the amount of water that you lose at the kidneys, which would help keep your blood pressure up. Which of those two hormones do you feel like sounds like it's a faster fix? Would it be the epinephrine we just talked about or this ADH one? Yeah, so that first hormone's like that immediate fast response. At ADH, it's a little slower, but it can help maintain the blood pressure at a higher level. All right. You may have seen this one. It says all the responses. Let's see, which ones we didn't talk about yet. So we did the epinephrine. We did, is ADH even on here? I don't even see it. Oh, there it is. You also make EPO. Why do you think you'd make EPO if you have low blood pressure? Yeah, but what was the signal? Remember, because EPO wasn't released in response to low blood pressure directly. What caused it to be made at the kidneys? Chapter 19. Why would you make more red blood cells? Right? So what's the connection between low blood pressure and low oxygen? What did you say earlier? Yeah, so if you have low blood pressure, you've got low perfusion everywhere, including the kidneys. So not enough blood means not enough oxygen. And if you have not enough oxygen, you make EPO. So it's one of the responses. But EPO, does that really change your blood pressure?
No.
It doesn't, right? But at least you'll have more blood cells in the blood, which would help. And the one we didn't talk about, you also activate renin, aldosterone, angiotensin system. And we're not going to go into the details of it, but those hormones also increase your blood pressure in different ways. So quite a few systems going on there. All right. So with your group here, I know it says individual first, but I think you might have an easier time with your group. We're just going to do question 1. So thinking about the different systems that helps fix your hypovolemic shock or low blood pressure.
But if you're,
Oh, we could go inside. It says, which is the resistance. Remember that word question we answered? Right, but it doesn't. Remember that question we just did? Which of the following would increase your vascular resistance and be consistent with your possibly remember? We just did that? Which yes, it's the opposite. You're right. To not have a low oh, your viscosity is increased if you dehydrate from urine. So you're increasing viscosity and then you're decreasing it. If you drink water, you're increasing viscosity. Which would make or whatever. Yes. 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 I agree because. But yes, that's right. But it's
So
What I
basically,
put right now, that's all I have.
that wasn't one of the ones I was gonna choose, but that is one of them.
Is it these four right here?
Not all of those. Maybe look back, you know that picture that I had up there?
Is that the epinephrine?
That'd be one of them. Mm-hmm.
And then the ADH.
That'd be one of them.
So we should be looking at that one.
Well, you can look at that thing in the book, but it's just not everyone listed on there was for low blood pressure.
I mean, that makes sense. Yeah, because when you start bringing in the.
And you said for the effect,
Yeah, when you said that.
I'd say that's, what does EPO do? What's the actual end effect of it?
I'll go EPO like one of them.
It was the one I was thinking of, but it is true. So I guess there's 5 possible ones. Yeah, and the stimulus is not enough oxygen, right? That's the actual stimulus. The rest of them are just explaining how it got there, right?
For EPO.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you can check Madison's for the EPO one. 'Cause she's got it.
We have a question, kind of.
Yeah.
Okay, so we kind of understand in one way how being thirsty would increase your blood pressure because you're increase the volume.
Uh-huh.
But if you think of it in terms of like viscosity, wouldn't drinking water make your blood less viscous?
Yeah.
Wait,
The volume wins out.
the volume. Okay.
The volume wins out.
Think of it.
Okay.
The increase in volume kind of cancels the resistance out.
about pressure, just kind of fucks that.
I wouldn't think.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think about the
Because that's what
viscosity.
we were getting so confused, because we're like, wait a second, when we're looking at it, if you think volume-wise, dealing with hydration. Okay, okay. So ignore that, okay.
So the stimulus for the first one, is it release of EPO or low oxygen in the blood?
Low to the blood.
Okay.
On the first one, I put low oxygen in the blood.
Yeah.
Is that what?
Yeah.
She had something extra.
I was like, what did I put? Where did I get that? Okay, okay, okay. And that affects,
Mhm.
what would be the plant
So the stimulus would be the low
right? Okay.
blood pressure,
Oh, okay.
right? So, and then the system is the sympathetic system,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. So,
Basically, you need to switch them,
switch them? Okay.
right?
Okay.
You're just putting this over here and this here. Because stimulus is what activates it. And honestly, I probably should have switched the boxes anyways, because it would make more sense to have the stimulus first, I guess. But,
So then, like, for the kidneys,
mhm.
what would the stimulus be? I guess I'm confused. So would it still be the EPO?
Well, what
No.
causes the EPO to be produced?
Yeah.
Mhm. And then the effect is, what does the EPO do? There you go.
Then your effect is to increase blood pressure.
What?
So the stimulus is still just low blood pressure then.
So even though, so that,
Because stimulate thirst would be an effect,
oh, okay.
right?
So could you put that in your effect, would be stimulates thirst and increase
Mhm.
blood pressure? Okay.
Yeah, because it does both, right?
Yeah, because I was getting confused because in a way it almost stimulates the thirst to then lower the, but that's all in the effect.
Right. And it also, causes vasoconstriction,
Yeah.
the angiotensin, and does the thirst. So it's kind of. So even if you didn't drink anything, your blood pressure still go up. Try out so far. So we got ADH. What about? I guess you got that. I might add the word baroreceptor to the sympathetic, because that's what activates the sympathetic.
That's your.
Mm-hmm.
So for epinephrine, would you put it with norepinephrine or do you do that as its own thing?
I'd put it together.
Okay, will you check to see if these are right? So
Mm-hmm. You're right. Epinephrine one, you might write baroreceptor next to it too, because that's what activates that whole system.
Okay,
And then how did it increase blood pressure? This one. What did it change of those things up there? Hmm? And the heart rate too, right?
so that'd be with the effect.
I mean, just saying like why it increased blood pressure, increased heart rate, and stroke volume.
Force of contraction is stroke volume, right?
Right. Mhm.
Okay.
And then how did ADH increase the blood pressure? It would, yeah, because it increased blood volume, which would be stroke volume. Because, it's kind of obvious if they're making these things at low blood pressure, it's going to raise your blood pressure, but how? Right? You want to know.
What would the other for then?
Well, kidneys, epinephrine, ADH. The other one is renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system, RAS system. Will be the last one.
After we go from the kidneys, because then for the angiotensin,
Uh-huh.
would that be the effect?
I just kind of put it as one system. So like renin, angiotensin, aldosterone
Oh,
would be the system, and then stimulus and effect of it.
okay.
Where does epinephrine and norepinephrine
The adrenal glands.
Maybe that would be
So that would be in here.
Well, what did you write so far? Well, so I think what you're writing is the baroreceptor system, which is also right.
Oh, that makes sense. That's why I was like, no, we need the system. But that's inside that.
So we can put, what?
Okay, on the first box, now it says system and
Yeah.
you're gonna put baroreceptors and then the slash and then you put
Oh, we do?
signal clearance.
Yeah, like this one. That system.
Oh, okay.
And then epinephrine's kind of a separate one, which would be like fight or flight, sympathetic system.
Yeah.
So epinephrine and norepinephrine are circadian.
They are.
Oh,
The adrenal glands.
We're doing
Well, the
That would be another one.
baroreceptors aren't just that one, that's also your ADH, right?
The sympathetic nervous system.
No, the baroreceptors.
The baroreceptors are this diagram is showing Michelle over here, the one with where you sense the blood pressure, send the information from the medulla. It's not on that one. It's this one. It's that one.
Okay.
So I would almost put the epinephrine fight or flight response, and it's separate things.
That's the system.
norepinephrine is something.
With epinephrine, so they do the same thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
For
well,
the adrenal gland.
right.
Well, I put medulla. But you said it's
I thought you wanted the baroreceptors.
Yeah, so the medulla wouldn't really be part of that as much.
I got confused because you said the baroreceptors. So I'm
Yeah,
confused.
well, I think the problem is like I was looking at what she had written down, you have something slightly different.
No, I just changed it with you.
Okay,
Saying over there.
so not adrenal then.
So the adrenal gland is
It should be the medulla.
activated by low blood pressure, low blood volume, which secretes norepinephrine, which increases contractility and whatever else it did.
Right. Or actually, I might even say the stimulus is like fight or flight response
For the north.
for the epinephrine. Because you can activate that system without low blood pressure, right? Just by being freaked out.
For being scared.
Yeah. So I think the effect, I don't think I'd say increase ADH. I would say what the ADH did. And then the system, I'd put ADH over there.
Over here.
Right? So hypothalamus slash ADH.
So it
And then what does ADH do?
needs to absorb water.
So which of those things does it affect? It does affect blood pressure, but how?
It increases the volume.
Which would be heart rate or stroke volume or resistance?
I think it could be both. I would put both. It could be activated by both. I'm guessing the resistance. No.
Stroke volume. You just told me it's volume.
See? Overcomplicating it.
Yeah.
So increases stroke volume.
Mhm. And then for kidney, I'd put EPO over with the system. And then for the effect, what does EPO do? Like you did for the first one, he said increased heart rate and contractility. There you go. No.
That's all right. So what would it be then?
What's you got so far? Sympathetic, EPO. Oh, I was going to put ADH here by itself.
Okay. So would these be different too?
This?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. Because you see how none of these are responses? They're just like saying everything's normal. These are all ways to fix low blood pressure, to get it back to that homeostasis.
Low blood pressure would be low.
And then let's see, kidneys, it's not, the stimulus is not high EPO, it's low oxygen.
Okay.
The EPO would go over here. And then that's right. Does that say increased blood volume?
That's your effect?
Or decrease?
That wouldn't fix it.
Oh, this one, huh?
It is increased blood pressure, but mostly from increased resistance.
Okay. So should I put increased resistance then instead?
And stroke volume. You could keep, sorry, I guess you could keep the blood pressure, but if you want, and then say it's up because more stroke volume, more resistance.
So for the bar receptors one, I mean, it's just bar receptors that are like the system, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and the stimulus is low blood pressure, which send a message to the nodes telling it to increase
Heart rate.
heart rate.
Would
Force
you
contraction.
Yeah,
do the
it's the
gland?
simplest system.
Would you do the gland as the CV center? Or no?
You could write on there, but I'd be happy with just baroreceptor system.
Okay. So increased heart rate.
Because all that together is considered a system. It's the baroreceptor system.
Just increased heart rate? Or do you want the force of
And contraction. So you got the last one?
No. Well,
Not enough oxygen, more red blood cells.
but so that's where the.
Oh, we haven't done that one yet. Do it?
So that's where the fourth.
Oh, that one. Yeah, that one's right.
So, okay, wait, I have a question.
Mhm.
Because you're saying that what the kidneys want and drinking water increases the volume. So increases the tension. But, okay, maybe it makes sense. When you're dehydrated, yeah, when you're dehydrated, you're decreasing the volume.
Right. But you're also slightly increasing the viscosity.
So the viscosity comes to play only in
Dehydration?
Well, I think it would depend on how dehydrated you were. But that question was just which of those increases resistance? Or
well, I was thinking about because
decrease, yeah,
the
increase.
high blood pressure. I was like, well, we could pick the opposite, which people can if you're dehydrated. I just think
the resistance.
Yeah, but it would decrease the volume too. So the actual effect on blood pressure probably is pretty minimal when you're dehydrated. When you're just mildly dehydrated, the volume's down, which decreases the pressure, but resistance is up, which increases the pressure.
right,
So you're right. What you're saying is right.
right.
They're
It's weird,
going in
like,
different
volume, like,
directions.
you don't think about the viscosity only when you're talking about like low blood pressure and like having a lot of water in there. You don't think about the viscosity. So when you have
It's always there, but it's minor. In fact, I should probably just take it out because it's a lot more minor than the actual volume you're pumping out. Except when it comes to like being at very high altitude, because that's what causes altitude sickness, like chronic, or yeah, the chronic altitude sickness. Your blood's like just choked full of blood cells. Like your heart can't push them around anymore. All right, so everybody's good on those. I went around and looked. Got all those systems. All right, so next up is high blood pressure. We already talked about baroreceptors. And if you notice, they function for low blood pressure and high blood pressure. That's just what the response is. So if your blood pressure goes up, the baroreceptors tell the medulla, and the medulla decreases stroke volume and heart rate so that your blood pressure goes down. I guess in general, do you think, which of the systems that we talked about for blood pressure are the quickest? So like the sympathetic one, which is highly related to the baroreceptors, right? And then all those hormones are sort of a little bit slower, like the ADH, the ANP, angiotensin. They can't react quite as rapidly. So you've got baroreceptors that decrease output, And they cause vasodilation, which decreases blood pressure because the resistance goes down. Because you're like, opening up all those blood vessels in the skin and everything. And then the main hormone involved, if you have high blood pressure, is made at the right atrium. And if it gets stretched from there being high blood pressure, it causes vasodilation and more water to be excreted in the urine. So those two things also decrease your blood pressure. So if you put more, if you're urinating more often, which of these things are you changing?
Stroke volume.
Right? 'Cause
So
you're
you
like,
only want to excrete a little bit because you don't want to make your blood viscous.
right, and that's also controlled. And actually what happens is you lose salt too. Well, that keeps the water balance accurate with osmosis and everything. But you're right, you can't go too far with A&P because, and this is why, if you have high blood pressure, does A&P fix it? I mean, if it did, no one would ever have high blood pressure. So this can only do so much. Because, you can't just pee out all your water in your blood because then you'd be dead. That would be bad. Right. So you can see that one. So stimulus is high blood pressure, baroreceptors, and that's going to do decreased output and vasodilation. So that's just the slide in the diagram you're looking at. All right, so let's see if we can fill in number 2 then. If you did already, maybe you did while I was talking.
High blood pressure. And then what would happen is increase your heart rate, vasodilation, and your blood pressure. Which factor do you want? Increase heart rate. Because it's vasodilation, so you have more blood pressure. And then I put the A&P, which is, I don't know if you want that natural diet. And I just went for the gland, the cells in the right atrium.
For this, like, are you literally wanting a system and a gland, or are you saying a system or a gland?
Or it depends on what you're looking at, because the baroreceptor doesn't have a gland.
Yeah. Okay.
And what makes A&P?
The cells.
What cells? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the atrium.
That one you need both of them.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
And I put low blood volume and blood pressure.
For A&P?
Your stimulus.
Yeah.
You sure about that?
Low blood volume and blood pressure. But is this response to high blood pressure?
Did I write it wrong?
No, I was reading.
Oh, that's
So
the,
high blood volume and high pressure.
yeah, I should make that more, that's the effect. Sweet.
And yeah, blood volume and blood pressure.
Yeah, wait, decrease stroke volume. Yeah, you got it. Does it make more sense now you're like doing it all together? That's only because you did that one first.
Did the harder one first and got the easy one done?
Yeah, I guess I could do the easy one first. Alright, so the effects. Stroke volume. Yeah, see, I got it. Decrease, what does that say? Oh, blood volume.
Yeah. In this one, we're concerned with the viscosity of blood.
More, well, and you're still concerned with pressures.
Right, but like with the, like, I mean, like with the water. Like
Oh, yeah, the water loss,
Like-
I'm just gonna call that a loss in my brain. I'm just calling it a loss, for real. It's not gonna soak in, and I'm not gonna, I'm not, I confuse them too much. I'm just gonna,
Like, so they're thinking like,
you know what I mean? And this is the thing that I second guess myself, is why I can't do that, because it's gonna screw me up, and it's gonna screw me up for everything.
All right, so let's do number 3 then, on the back. Let's try this one on your own first. Give you a few minutes. So what would happen to a person's blood pressure in each of these situations? Cool. So try this one on your own first. Give everybody a chance to think it over a little bit. All right, so take a little time to talk about it with your group and make sure you're being as detailed as you can in your answers. Yeah, so A means you can't make ADH.
Okay.
Just, you can't at all. Really? You don't remember the pain of getting a tattoo? I don't know what childbirth is like.
You don't have a sleeve under this?
Dude, I hate needles so much, there's no way I could handle getting a tattoo.
Right now, I can start all flu shots. He gives like 2,000 flu shots a year.
Oh my goodness.
All these dudes like so tatted up, like cry like little babies when they get their flu shot.
Yes.
Just more like a, so with like overproduction of AMP, like so you said that if you're taking out like a lot of water and salts from your urine, or your urine, from your blood,
Yeah.
and then that would continue to happen, so your blood pressure would lower,
Right.
but then it would continue to lower, leaving nothing but blood, so then your blood would become thick, so then when your blood pressure would shoot up,
Become high blood
it
pressure?
would stay high.
Well, you're thinking the right way. Because, I mean, you obviously have all the low blood pressure responses. So try to counteract that.
Would it be able to?
Yeah, would it be?
I don't know.
Would it just
It
stay-
depends
So
on
we
how
just
much
say-
you were making.
So it says overproduction. So we just say that obviously you would drop.
I think you just take it at the first response. Like, what would having too much AMP do?
So don't take it to the extreme of making your blood pressure rise back up because of it.
Right, because you have all those other systems to respond
Yeah.
to it. Eventually.
So-
Worst case
Okay.
scenario, if those weren't
Play
responding, this is
racist.
what would happen, but assuming that all your other things are working well.
Well, I guess I'd say before they get a chance to respond.
Low low blood pressure.
Because obviously, if you start combining all of them together, like you can't predict what would happen.
Yeah. Okay. So assume it wouldn't make it to the point to where you.
Right. Just make too much A&P. What's the first thing that happens? What we're
So
looking
low
at.
blood pressure and low volume. Just that. Oh my god. Here we are thinking like.
But see,
way
what's awesome
more.
thinking about all that, now when you go back to look at all this, it's like easy.
That's
So you've
true,
thought
I'm
through all
gonna
these
get it.
systems together. Well, some big hearts. Oh, we should talk about all these together.
I think like when
All right, so our first one, unable to produce ADH. What would happen to the person? Increased stroke volume. What? Well, what is, if you look back at your table, what did you say ADH did? Does it increase your stroke volume or decrease it? Okay, so if you don't make it, all right, so what does ADH do if it's there? So increased stroke volume, no ADH. What happens to your stroke volume? No change. Well, so when do you make ADH? Do you make it when you have low blood pressure or high blood pressure? Okay, so if you couldn't make ADH, would you have a hard time responding to low blood pressure or high blood pressure? What if your blood pressure was normal to start with? Would you have any problems? You wouldn't, right? So there's basically two different answers for that one. If your blood pressure is normal, nothing would change. If you happen to have some kind of, like if you go into shock or something, your blood pressure would stay lower than it would otherwise. Right, because this ADH is only made when your blood pressure drops. If your blood pressure is normal, then nothing would change. No, you'd have normal blood pressure, unless something else happened to you.
So if you have lower, but then once something causes your blood pressure to go down, you would be able to get it back up.
Yeah, so let me ask you this. So on this table in the front, which of these are activated when your blood pressure is totally normal? Are any of them activated? No. That's kind of the point. These are all with homeostasis, you know, for everything. Unless it goes away from homeostasis, nothing is going to happen. But so that's two answers then, right? So if your blood pressure is normal, it's going to stay normal. If your blood pressure drops, it's not going to increase like it should. You wouldn't be able to get it back up if it dropped from one of those reasons, like loss of blood or whatever else would happen. All right, so the other two are a little easier. I'm always doing that, putting the hardest one first. So if you make too much A&P, yeah, you might be dehydrated, and what would happen to your blood pressure? It would drop, no matter what, right? It's not like you're not responding, you're just always making this hormone. And then for the epinephrine, increased heart rate, risk of stroke, and blood pressure, higher. So it's kind of confusing because, you know, I could have put not able to make A&P for the question, and it'd be kind of the same idea of the ADH one. Yeah, and the good thing, like, did you see how we have like all these systems? So if one of them's not working so well, do you think the other ones would help?
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of why you have so many. They're somewhat redundant in a way. But probably the easiest thing, if you just remember A&P is your only high blood pressure hormone. Right? All those other hormones were made from low blood pressure. It's kind of one way to remember it. Yeah, we'll take like half an hour for questions before we do lab. What are we even doing in lab tomorrow?